Welcome to The Faithful Steward. This is a podcast all about sharing biblical wisdom and practical insights in order to help church leaders pursue and teach financial freedom as part of Christian discipleship. We believe this is a spiritual conversation, and this is a place where the church needs to lead the way in order to move our communities forward in how we steward God's resources. I'm your host, James Lenhoff, and I am so passionate about this conversation and helping leaders have the confidence to step into it. We believe that if we help people thrive financially and grow spiritually, it changes everything. And I am so excited to join you on this journey. This podcast is brought to you by Good Sense. If you'd like more information about what we're up to, you can go to our website at goodsensemovement.org. All right, let's get started with today's conversation. As 2023 draws to a close, I want to invite us to spend some time looking back, to evaluate how this year was. How was 2023? Were you faithful in your stewardship this year? Did you honor God with His resources? Did you see these resources as His? Did you manage them well? And I know sometimes this sounds like an overwhelming question. It sounds like a really hard process to just look at the honest truth and evaluate what this last year has meant in terms of stewardship. But I honestly think if we aren't willing to face this, if we don't look back and evaluate it and just have an honest conversation with ourselves, with our spouse, with our family, and really understand where are the things that we say, yes, that was it, we hit the target, and what are the things we missed on? What are the things we need to change? It is really unlikely that we will grow in this area of stewardship if we don't have just an honest evaluation every year of what it's been like and what we want to see different. And so as we step into the close of this year, I would invite you to spend some time just looking through this. And it may mean that we need to pull together the data, right? If you have been tracking your spending and you know where the money went, that's great. That makes this so much easier. If you haven't been tracking it, if you really don't know what has happened with those resources that God gave you to manage, you may want to pull things like bank statements, credit card statements. So just start getting at least some sense of categories. Where is this stuff going? What have we done with God's resources over the last 12 months? And by the way, if tracking your resources is something that you've been struggling to really get a handle on, we've got some tools and some advice on how to really build that in to your systems, and you can check some of those links out in the show notes. But one of the things that I think is most important is for us to just face the truth of where these resources went. No immediate judgment, no decisions on what we're going to change and how we're going to change it. Initially, we just want to understand it. What did this look like this year? What did our life cost us? How did we spend God's time? Did we invest our skills in a way that we feel was a full, meaningful service to others? What did this look like? And so as a starting point, I would just encourage you to see where your money went and ask the question, is that what we intended? Maybe you didn't start this year with any intention. Maybe you hadn't really built any sort of plan, but you still know, you still have a sense of, man, it wasn't a great year. Or maybe you have a sense of, man, this was maybe the best year we've had in terms of faithful stewardship. What can we learn from this? What can we replicate and continue in 2024? And so first and foremost, understand what your life has cost, what decisions you made intentionally, what were some of the decisions that you made that were less intentional, more emotional, more of a reaction than an intentional decision. Start to have that conversation with your spouse, with your family. Start to really evaluate together, was this a good year? If we had an opportunity to do this year again, would we do it the same way? What would we change? And so just start with an overview. Just take your temperatures in your family. Man, it felt like we had a lot of great time together. It seemed like we spent our time really well. Or man, we were running in 1,000 different directions. We really didn't see each other. We didn't take a vacation together. We didn't really get time together. There's a really quick gut check there that shouldn't take you long. Next, I want you to look at your actual categories, your spending. What did you spend those resources on? Are there things there that actually felt wasteful, felt unintentional? Are there areas where you really want to increase your spending next year? You really want to change your focus on certain things. Maybe you want to buy less material goods and spend more money on experiences. Maybe there's hobbies that you really want to take up as a family. And in order to do that, you're going to have to cut back on other areas that aren't as important. What do those things cost? What is that going to take? We need the data. We need to know what this looks like before we turn and face the next year and hope for something different. How did your net worth do? Your net worth is a great indicator of health financially. Did your net worth go up? Were you saving with an intentionality? Were you getting the match from your employer 401k plan? Were you putting money aside for retirement, things like Roth IRAs? Were you growing your net worth by saving? Or were you just paying your bills? Were you growing your net worth by paying down debt? Because debt reduction is also a way to grow your net worth. Again, your net worth is just what you own minus what you owe. You can increase what you own, save more money, and that increases your net worth. You can also reduce what you owe, and that increases your net worth. And so did you see things like credit card debt grow or shrink this year? Did you take on more debt for like a new car or a new lease payment for a car? Did you accumulate more debt, or did you accumulate a bigger net worth? We want to be on track to see that net worth growing over time. That is an indication of health. I really don't care how much money you make. If you are making $50,000 or $500,000, but your net worth is not growing, your cash flow is not relevant to me. What matters is whether you are using those resources to continually build more and more opportunity for future obedience. If we are growing our net worth, we are more likely to be in a position where if God says, give this money, do this thing, help this family, impact this cause, we say yes. And so we want to be putting ourselves in a position to be quick to obey in the future. And your net worth, growing your net worth, gives you the confidence to do that. So how did it do? Do you even know what your net worth is? Maybe that's your most important starting point as you turn to next year, because it'll help you identify how you can grow that in 2024. One of the things that I would like to do with this end of the year is just ask the question, what did we want this year? And did we get those things? What were the most important pieces, the things that we were really excited about as we walked into 23? Did we actually extract from this year what we were hoping? Did we have the shared experiences? Did we grow as a family? Did we invest ourselves in service? Did we do the things we wanted to do? That is a really important self-evaluation because it gives us an indication of where our priorities have fallen. We may say we want these things, but are we willing to let go of the stuff that it takes? Are we willing to put down the things that we can't have in order to pick up the things that we're choosing? This will give you a very clear indication of whether that has happened or not. We talked in a podcast a little bit ago about the idea of the indicators of faithful stewardship. One of those indicators is that you're living in that 10-10-80 kind of range, 10% giving, 10% saving, and 80% lifestyle expenses. That 80, it's great if it's less than that. It's great if you're giving 15 instead of 10 or 20. It's great if you're saving 15 or 20. What we need to at least be at that balance, the target line for us to at least be able to say we're on track is that 10, 10, 80. And so bucket these expenses, look at your savings, look at your giving. Where were you? Did you get close on any of those numbers? If the lifestyle expenses are 90, it's going to be really, really hard to be able to get to 10, 10, 80. We're going to need to figure out what big rocks we can move in our spending. What are the lifestyle expenses that are stealing from us the ability to save and give? And what are we willing to do as we turn to 2024? I want you to ask the question, how did we do with our giving? Were we giving from a place of obligation? Was it drudgery? Was it really painful? Or were we cheerful about it? Were we enjoying it? Did it feel fun and exciting to engage in generosity because we felt like we had extra? We felt like we were giving from a place of God's abundance. We were trusting in his provision. What did generosity feel like for you and your family this year? And what needs to change in order for you to turn to 2024 and feel confident and excited to engage in the generosity that God might be calling you to? How do we push that needle further? How do we get beyond where we've been and keep stretching further into generosity? Because that is beautiful. That is God's heart, is for us to be more and more generous because he is so generous. If this conversation is a source of tension between you and your family, you and your spouse, if you step into this discussion and you know there's going to be a fight here, there's going to be a lot of emotion, what I would encourage you to do is start with celebration. Start with the things that you can identify that were on target, the dreams and the hopes that you had for the year that you did achieve. We tend so often to start with the negative. We tend to focus on what we missed and where we failed and how we should have done it differently, and it's not good enough. And that is not the intention of this conversation. I think if that's the way this conversation goes, we don't ever want to have this conversation. We want to avoid it like the plague. But if we can approach this with, first and foremost, we want to celebrate growth. We want to acknowledge, hey, our net worth did go up. Hey, we did save. We did give a little more. We did do some of these things. We may not have hit all the targets, but we've seen progress. Focus on that first. Then start asking the question, what would allow us to move more things forward, to actually get further into faithful stewardship? And there may be some tension there, but recognize the problem is the problem. The person is never the problem. And so I would just encourage you to turn towards these things in a unified team rather than a contentious conflict where you're blaming or shaming each other. It's a terrible way to spend Christmas, but it's a really hard thing to do, to then turn to the new year as a team in order to really make the changes you need to make if you're starting in a contentious argument. And so we want to make sure that we first celebrate in order to recognize the progress we've made as a team, and then we can more honestly and less emotionally face the other improvements we need to make in the coming year. I know this may sound overwhelming. I know this is a conversation that may make you face some hard truth about some ways that you have been less than faithful in your stewardship of God's resources. Maybe this year you've seen your net worth actually decline because you took on more debt, or you've been unable to keep up with some of those costs. Maybe you've watched some of these dreams and hopes that you had fade away because you haven't been managing your time very well and you can't invest yourself in those things. Maybe you realize as you go through this that there's been a lot of self-focus, a lot of enjoyment and pleasure and indulgence in your spending this year. I would just ask you to engage in this with less self-loathing, less judgment, and more curiosity. Discover together what happened. Be curious about what happened and why, because that will help you turn to 2024 with the confidence and the understanding that it takes to actually change that, to actually move in the direction you want your family to move. I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas. I hope that you get a tremendous amount of delight and rest. Just soak in this time. And when we are on the other side of the holidays, we want to really focus on setting the course for a 2024 where when we do this same evaluation at the end of next year, we see way more progress, way more faithfulness, and we are leading the people that we love in faithful stewardship. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Faithful Steward podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and other information that we mentioned in today's episode. Also, be sure to check out our website at goodsensemovement.org to get all the resources we offer churches to help equip them in teaching financial stewardship to their community. If you have any questions or any topics you want to make sure we cover on our show, you can email me at jameslenhoff@goodsensemovement.org. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you all have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.